So I'm happy to be at Present Body Studio with you, Nita Little, conversing together around contact improvisation and particularly your work in relation to contact. I can say, Nita, you are one of the founders of contact improvisation. You are a very important figure in the contact community as a teacher, performer, researcher. And I would be very much interested in hearing what is it that you really do nowadays, after all these years of experience, with contact improvisation.
Ooh, good question. The last thing you mentioned was that I'm a researcher, and I think that's been persistent throughout my whole career. So Kontakt began as research, and it kind of has persisted as research, which means that it has not stabilized, it has not kind of coalesced into a set form, but rather it's a moving form about motion, an investigation in which the practice itself investigates. So what I'm doing is continuing that investigation. I should say that even since the very, very early days of Kontakt, perhaps even when it first began, I was interested in the relationship between the mind and the body and how I was present in each moment, because it's an improvisational form, such that how I thought or how I was present, how I was paying attention, how I was embodied, influenced what would happen, what I would do, even what others might do. And since Kontakt is a research form, the investigations of that order made me have to attend within milliseconds of awareness, and then be able to think back, recapture, what was I not only doing with my body physically, but what was I doing with my body attentionally. It took many years for me to come to a point where I realized that the mind is inseparable from the body, and that when I dance, when I do anything in fact, I am functioning as a body-mind because I'm alive. So if you research a body that is dead, or a body that you essentially stop, let's do that right, you essentially stop it by taking a picture at this moment in time, taking an x-ray at that moment in time, you will not see a mind there, you'll see only a body. Or if you listen only to a voice, you will hear the body that is implicit in that voice, because no voice is the same. But if you stop the body, if you stop a moment in time, you'll have a body and a mind, not one thing. In motion, in life, we're one thing. And that one thing is what I study. And I study it more, and I study it in terms of dance. At this moment in time, I'm very invested in dance improvisation, when we make relationships happen, ecological relationships in particular. So the ecology of being means that I'm not a separate thing in space, that I necessarily exist relationally to a space that I also am, which becomes more clear the second you start to think of beingness as body-mind beingness.
So you're talking about body-mind connection and a lot of practices, somatic practices. Talk about that, like even
I would be
yoga.
even more adamant. I wouldn't say connection, because connection presumes
It's one.
two
It's
things.
like unification. It's like one. Like
Right.
body-mind centering is.
Right, so we can't say
it's
connection.
one. Yes. Okay. I take that word out.
Let me tell you how difficult it was while writing my dissertation to discipline myself away from words that we that are familiar within our field,
Right.
and that are familiar within the general culture.
Okay. What is contact?
Improvisation or
What
contact?
is contact, and how your understanding of contact relates to contact improvisation?
Contact is the presence of an ecological relationship. So that means it's emotion. There's no contact without motion. It doesn't exist. So contact is the variety of ways that we exchange motion, that we engage with motion within an ecological world. So contact improvisation is a dance form in which we may be moving together through touch, in which the touch is informing both beings of the other. When contact gets really fabulous, it turns into this thing in which two beings start acting as one being. And that can be within a second, that can be within multiple seconds, multiple moments. As that happens, two beings acting as one, we are engaged in a relationship that develops toward what we could call communion, a relationship of communion, which is really interesting to me. What is the relationship of communion? When two bodies act as one, then if one is under the other, supporting the other, that is one moment that then can tip into a fall in which both are reading, sharing, communing. Everything that one body knows, the other is informing.
Right.
And then it becomes a new form in which the person who formerly was on top is now underneath. And those relationships are relationships of continuous change. I'm fascinated, I mention this because I'm fascinated by what that means politically. What it means in terms of political potentials that have not yet been thought of. Because we've been so hierarchical in our thinking, in our dancing, in our political practices, that we have never considered the possibility of what changes when people function in this continually changing ecology that is sometimes communing and sometimes not, sometimes other forms of knowing happening.
We can say that it's two beings dancing together in contact.
Absolutely.
And they dance together as one, like you say.
But not necessarily.
But yes, there is also the differences. How do I read my partner while there is a constant change in the way we make contact with each other? Because how my reflexes are responding to the moment can be very different from how your reflexes respond. Right. And that makes me think of contact improvisation in performance. And what makes a contact dance exciting for you?
Well,
The word exciting.
you're talking to me, which means that I'm a little bit different. By that I mean that when I watch bodies move, I'm watching attention.
Okay.
I never just watch bodies move. I never simply reduce somebody to their visuality. I'm reading the motion of the mind, the motion of the attention, how it is being, how it lives in the flesh, how it lives within the space. When they, and here's a word I'm developing right now actually that I'm writing about, when they mind one another, when they inform one another of their presence, how they do that. I'm really interested in the actions of presence. So space, for instance, for me doesn't always have the same thickness. If you're really concentrated on something, you will be concentrating the space, thickening it.
Right.
And that I find fascinating. It exists in contact all the time. So contact for me, as you this kind of answers a previous question of yours, doesn't begin with skin touch. It begins here. You don't move that I don't feel it.
Right. And how would you bring your understanding of contact? What would you say, let's say, to a contemporary dancer who questions around the value of entering into the contact improvisation practice? What would you say to a contemporary dancer?
Well, what's going to be different? And I'm a contemporary dancer. So, but someone whose contemporary dance is limited to particular dance techniques, even including release techniques, say, that what you will experience in doing contact that's different is contact is principle-based. It's an improvisational dance form, so the training is training in principles. What happens when? How do you know what to do next? Not training in specific actions necessarily, or training in specific pathways, although some people teaching contact do that. But it's not forming patterns, repeatable patterns. It is informing principles that function with the laws of physics. So learning how to experience physics, the actions of physics on your physical form, that is a big part of the training. It of course increases your range of possibility for motion if you're functioning with physics as opposed to functioning despite physics, doing visually interesting actions, but without the engagement with physics, the alignment with physics.
And yet, there is a movement vocabulary that is very distinct when you see a contact improvisation dance happening.
Yeah, you'll see ways people spiral into the floor, for instance.
Right.
You'll see ways that they might take weight or find an arc of weight. But, and that's true. I find personally I'm constantly messing with patterns. I could see a whole bunch more messing with patterns happening in contact improvisation, quite frankly. And that's my preference. I prefer to have to explore the edges of possibility rather than settle and sit within unknown possibilities that are comforting. And that even may be accelerating and wow, but I'd like to find the edge of it. I don't actually go wow until I see an edge.
What do you mean by that?
An edge where you don't really know what might happen next.
Okay.
Where you have to be alert, where you have to wake up, where you have to be alive, wide alive, and use all your sense abilities in order to move with and through those moments. But I do that intellectually too. I'm interested in edges wherever they appear.
Sure. And yet, what I have been fascinated with Kontakt as a Kontakt dancer and teacher is the sensory aspect within the dance. How, let's say, the shifts, the changes in sensing and feeling within the dance creates movement possibilities, creates
certainly
shifts, creates different responses.
And that's how you stay informed.
Right.
Whether you're on an edge or not. I mean, I can enjoy a luxurious dance as well. Everything doesn't have to be gymnastic.
Yes.
Yeah. But as sensuous dance maybe accelerates to where you're playing with the engagement and momentum, weight falling, rising, then you really more and more need to slow down within your own presence, your own experienceability, your ability to experience, and be informed by those somatic skills that you have spent time developing.
Yeah. And another aspect of Kontakt that I find sometimes challenging is how we deal with neutrality. In some way, like while I'm dancing, how do I allow what is there to be happening instead of interfering into the dance in a way that would sort of create sometimes like a disruption in flow or disruption in inner flow in the dance. Can you help me
with what you mean by neutral?
Neutral, yes. Let's see. If my body understanding and my body awareness is in a way limited, and how I use weight creates a language, how I use my tonality creates a language, how my tension becomes so much that it prevents flow and a sense of continuity in the dance, then this aspect of doing more, being more, sometimes it's like my personal, let's say...
You're talking about an emotional pressure?
Not only emotional, it's also on the physical level, because often, you know, I touch a body where tonus is really much higher and
right.
It can create possibilities for flow, for communication, sensing each other within momentum. So, like often, for instance, a dancer can be with like a habit of giving more energy than necessary. And so then what happens to the dance? For instance, there's dancers who consider extensions in a way where the joints can be locked. And for me, this is a way of interfering into the natural, let's say, functioning of my physical being, my joints, my being, yes? So in that sense, I affect the dance if my joints get locked. if my tonus is higher, so then if I give more dramatic expression maybe to a dance, how does this affect? Because the contact improvisation dance, because what I see often also in the contact dance is like there is less of this dramatic aspect. There is more of a, I call it neutrality within the dance. Maybe you can give me your understanding of this. I said many different things right now, but
you want my understanding?
Yes, I'm trying to.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think contact brings us to eventually, and that is a powerful tool, whether it's channeled towards contact improvisation or contemporary dance practices, is to be efficient, physically, able to allow for a way of being in the physical form that is ready to change, readiness, that percolating possibility that allows for efficient action. What I often speak to is the ability to change material properties, which means that in one moment I might be very deeply relaxed, and or one part of me might be what I call disassembling, or acting as multiple parts. And another aspect of my physical form may be fully organized, functioning as a whole form. So an ability, and these two forms will have completely different physical properties, material properties. If I throw my arm and it is disassembled, the weight will fly to the outside of that arc into my hand, and I'll hardly have to use any muscle at all. If I have a fully assembled arm and I want to do that same action, it's going to take a great deal more energy.
Right.
And the action itself, the weight does not fall to the outside, the weight stays fully, every cell's functioning in its place. I'm not acting in a water form, I'm acting in a kind of more of a wood form or a bound form. Learning to be able to have those different properties requires that physical tone has to be flexible. So maybe what you mean when you mean neutral is able to change.
Exactly.
Flexible.
Yes. Being elastic, and
which in some senses is being not already engaged, but ready to engage, being in that volatile place of you could go this way, you could go that way.
Yes.
Which is why you call it neutral.
Right. So I know you have a research group.
I do.
In California, right?
Yeah. And research company.
Yes. Can you tell us something around this research that you are in a process of practice with all these beautiful dancers?
I started the research company because because it supported my writing of a dissertation. I needed to train dancers to be able to work attentionally and to discover and explore the variations of attention and what the implications were when we change our attention. So for instance, I mentioned the word imminding. One of the things we explored was how we imind and how we are imminded by one another. So when do I become aware that you're in my space? When do I create space with you? How does our attention abut?
Right.
and what happens when that happens. What are the choices we have? The research company became very important to me in the writing of my dissertation, which I now have done. I'm done.
Great. Wonderful.
Yeah, the dissertation is called Articulating Presence, Creative Actions of Attention in Contemporary Dance. I'm invested in understanding how we change our presence as performers. It's definitely a performer's practice.
And what do you think about how contact improvisation has evolved? In a way, when I travel and in different festivals, teaching, dancing, and I see contactors from different parts of the world, I see also very exciting, for me, kind of difference. Like the Finnish dancers dance very different from, let's say, dancers in California or Germany. So it's like, what do you think around that? Because I also start to see how the aesthetics, after all these years, after this 42 years of contact since you started the forum, how there is also the aesthetic aspect within the forum, although it is, as I said, like you said, also like an investigation through improvisation. So, what do you think of that?
I love the fact that contact has not been set so that it is a open form that continues to move, and it moves differently in different places. I love that. I think that gives it a real strength. It means that somebody from Finland can come here to Greece and study contact and have something to offer and have something to learn. And that happens. Contactors travel all over the world. As I travel the world, I meet people from South America in Vienna and vice versa. Someone from Norway in São Paulo. How I think of contact, actually, I've done a few lectures on this, is that I think of contact as crowdsourced.
Can you repeat that? As?
Crowdsourced. Do you know that word, crowdsourcing? Crowdsourcing is what happens on the internet. When somebody has an idea or wants to investigate something and asks kind of broadly, what do you think is possible here? Or how does this happen? And she gets a ton of answers back. And within those answers, something arises. That thing that arises has been crowdsourced. Many people have contributed to make it happen. And who those people are may not be important, but they have been. And I think of contact that way as well. Contact has been crowdsourced. It's been crowdsourced because it's not been set. It's been crowdsourced because when I'm teaching a class, what someone doesn't know in one part of the world causes me to investigate how to teach that thing, or what that thing they don't understand is in their unique form, coming from their particular understanding of contact. So, yeah, I think that's one of its incredible, powerful strengths. It does mean that sometimes teaching is uneven. It does mean that there are teachers teaching contact who actually have never taken a contact class. They've been doing ecstatic dancing and think they can see what it is and then do it. Of course, they're not going to learn how to learn, which if I'm teaching a contact class, one of my jobs, and probably my most important job, is to teach people how to research. How do you learn? How do you investigate something that has no words? And resolve from that investigation something that you can put into words and something that you can put into action. And it won't look like a set action. When people are teaching contact as set actions, there's a problem because they're not looking beneath those actions to know what's really going on.
Right. So, yes, you repeat the word research a lot in the form.
Yeah, I do, don't I?
Yes, and I appreciate this understanding of the basis and, if you like, the intention within the form that we can have as practitioners and as teachers and
as dancers.
As dancers, exactly. Of course, I can say that a big part of the community of Kontakt is also engaging people who love contact for social purposes, let's say.
And not everyone's as adamant as you and I are.
Yes, exactly. And it's like also legitimate. This is also a very beautiful part that brings the community together, and you can see people who love movement are not necessarily like committed dancers,
right.
That they are interested in CI. But I find sometimes a little bit of confusion from some parts of the community, some people in the community, how they sort of approach the form with touch, with play, with being social, all that. So I don't know, somehow, like, I understand, also talking with other pioneers like yourself, it seems that you just let go and you offer the form to all of us and let it grow, giving, of course, always this direction that you do. And I really appreciate how you insist for all your life this investigation process, because you are constantly in there.
Yeah, I am, but let me say,
yes,
Kontakt started in 1972. At that time, there were all these newly arising forms of somatic work, Rolfing and Feldenkrais and various
body mind centering.
It wasn't around yet. All these other things like the martial arts, which were becoming important, and everything, you maybe had to have these belts to do the martial arts, you had these steps. And one day we were on tour, Steve and Steve and Nancy, myself, and I think probably Kurt Siddle, and we were in Oakland, as I recall. And we learned that one of my students, had gone to Vancouver and was teaching contact. Well, this was the first time anybody had taught contact improvisation that wasn't one of us. And we were stunned. So the question came up, what do we do about this? And here we were right up against that. So I offered that maybe we should somehow stabilize it and set the parameters around who got to teach it. And Steve, and it is to Steve's credit that Steve said, who here wants to be the police? Nobody wants to be the police. Why don't we allow this thing to have its own weight that those people who are willing to investigate it and really work with it will become the teachers of it. And if they're good, people will follow them. And if they're not any good, it's not going to happen. People will move away. Trust people. It's just essentially moving into the very trust that Kontakt requires within the doing of it, right? And that was brilliant. And that simple step, that refusal to kind of what's the word I want? That refusal to codify it, that refusal to politicize it as an economy, put it within the economy of capitalism. That was great. What a freedom we all had then. Yeah, I think that was a political move.
I agree completely.
Yeah. And one we have all just moved with. That, of course, forced us to really teach people to be prepared to take this thing on, however you are, wherever you are. And it has, in fact, informed me as a lifetime of researching now. It has informed me or pushed me into what I think I am doing now, which is really suggesting that dance itself is a research form. That the value of dancing is not simply performance. That the value of dancing is its research into experience. What does it mean to be an experiencing being? What are the potentials of experience? And believe me, I do not think we have a clue as to where that can go. I think that's a huge exploration. We're not at any set point with that. That's an opening. And where it goes, wow.
Okay. Under this last words, thank you so much, Nita.
Thank you for being here. I'm so happy to be here with you.
It's a shared feeling. Thank you.